I'm gonna show you guys how to crochet with chain, which is what this is. So I just made this balaclava. It's my second one I made, and I wrote a pattern for it, and it fits so much better than the first one I made. And I have more chain, and I'm gonna show you guys how to crochet with chain. This is kind of a follow along tutorial for my pattern. So if you want to know exactly how to make this, then you should go check out my pattern. So I will say that this is more geared towards advanced crocheters. You're welcome to try it if you're a beginner. Just know that you really need to know and understand like how to tell your stitches, especially in the beginning. It's really confusing. And the chain just kind of like falls apart while you're working on it. It doesn't really hold any structure. So you have to be really skilled at knowing how to tell your stitches. So let's get into it. Okay, so besides your chain, some of the other things you're gonna need is some jump rings, preferably the really small ones that kind of match your chain. And then you need some pliers and some wire cutters, which I just use my Leatherman for. And then another thing that's really important is a stitch marker or something to mark your stitches. Okay, so one thing that's really important is that all of your chain should be on the same surface that you're working on. If you have your chain on the floor or in a place that's lower than where your hands are working, it will be a lot harder to make your tension looser, and your chain will just like fall very quickly off the project. So if we're following the pattern, we begin with a slip knot, and make sure your first chain is really loose, and you're gonna chain 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so then you're gonna slip stitch into your first chain. So that'll be this one right here, and slip stitch. Okay, so now it's gonna feel really tangly, but if you just kind of try to separate it, you'll see a very obvious hole from where your chains are. So around here is all your chains. So find that hole, and you're gonna chain 1. And you can make that chain tight, but then your next one you're going to want to be loose. So every time you make a single crochet, you're going to want to pull up your chain so you have around an inch of slack, and that will help the project go along faster. And then also it'll make that meshy look, and it'll be way easier to get your hook in and out of the single crochet spaces. So once you have that hole, you're just going to make your single crochets directly into there. Okay, so that's what the starting will look like. So you have your chain 4 right here, which this is where you're crocheting into, and then this is what one single crochet will look like, and this is my first one. So I'm gonna mark it with a stitch marker by going under both of the loops, and continue working single crochets as the pattern states until you reach your first one. Okay, so I've finished working my single crochets, and it's looking very messy right now. And the hardest part about working with chain is figuring out what your stitches are. So you can kind of try to separate them. So this is the whole space from the starting chain 4, and then these are each of my single crochets. So now for the rest of your rounds, you're going to be connecting it. So single crochet directly into that first one, and make sure that you're having loose tension, and that will be your first single crochet of round 2. So you can take your stitch marker out and insert it into the single crochet you just made. And as I work, I kind of like to pull apart the chain a bit to see where my single crochets are. And since you have really loose tension, will just kind of be easier to see because you'll just kind of be crocheting into that whole space. Continue with the pattern, and make sure you're staying consistent with your tension. I think that's one of the hardest parts about working with chain, is having consistent tension, which is one of the reasons why this is a very hard pattern for beginners. Okay, so I've made it back around to the beginning, and like the last round, we're just gonna start our new round by single crocheting into the single crochet from your last round, and switch your stitch marker. And another thing is that, as you can see, I'm always keeping my hook on the chain. That's because if I take my hook out, it'll be really easy for this to get unraveled. So really try to keep it on to mark where your round is. And you can kind of start to see the shape forming. And continue with the pattern as it states, and just go slow and make sure that you're pulling your hook up around an inch each time you are single crocheting. I'm going to show you how to connect two pieces of chain together since I'm at my end. So you can't tie them together like normal yarn, so this is where the jump rings come into play. So to connect them, it's actually fairly easy. All you need to do is get your jump ring, basically open up your jump ring and then connect it on either side. So I just opened up my jump ring, and then I'm going to grab one side, grab the other side, and then close it. You want to make sure it's closed really tightly so that there's no chance of unraveling. And then there you have it. Okay, at this point, I have finished all the increases we're gonna make, and after this row, your piece should measure around 6.5 inches. Obviously it's chain, so it's very malleable. It's not going to be exact, but just if you're in that ballpark, you're in the right place. At this point, it's getting pretty heavy, so I'm just going to show you how I kind of hold it, and how I like move each of the stitches. So I just finished my last increase of my last row, so I'm going to make sure I have around an inch of slack and make a single crochet and change my stitch marker. There we go. And so at this point, like, I just kind of get in the rhythm, and each time I kind of pull up the single crochet from the previous row to kind of figure out where my hook should go. Like that. The next one, I kind of hold it by that last row, and it should be a lot easier at this point to get your tension right. I feel like the beginning is the hardest part to crochet tightly, so I just move along and pull up each of these loops as I go, just to make sure I'm crocheting in the right spot. Okay, I just finished my balaclava, and now I'm going to show you guys how to bind off and tie in your ends. So this was my last single crochet, and into the next single crochet, I'm just going to do a slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain one, and I will just cut my chain, and pull through. Okay, so that is how you would regularly finish and cast off for crochet, but because this is chain, this isn't tight enough and secure enough that it's gonna fall off if it's jostled in the wrong way. So we're gonna secure it with a jump ring just to make sure it will never come apart. So grab your jump ring and your pliers again. So as we did for connecting chains, we're just going to open up the jump ring, and then basically I'm going to attach it to a couple chains from the single crochet. So I'm just going to insert my jump ring into whichever chain I can grab. Just gonna grab a few. And then I'm going to take my tail and connect it there. So right now on my jump ring, it's really hard to tell, but I have the tail connected and it's connected to the actual piece. So I'm just going to close it off and make sure that this is really secure. And then with the rest of your tail, I'm going to just cut it off. So I'm going to cut it off on the chain that's next to that jump ring. You can kind of see how where the jump ring is right there, and I'm just going to cut it off on the other side of the jump ring. There we go. So now your chain should be connected. And now you're going to do the exact same thing with your starting chain. So grab your jump ring and open it up. And then find your chain and just connect it to wherever you can find onto the actual piece. So I got the piece and now I'm going to connect it right there. I'm going to close the jump ring and then secure that jump ring really tight. Now you can see that the jump ring is holding the tail and the piece, and you're just going to cut off above that jump ring again. And there you have it, a finished balaclava. Okay, so here is my finished balaclava. It is so shiny and so cool. Here's the back. I don't really know how to wear it with long hair. Maybe I just put my hair up, but so this chain is a little bit thicker than the gold one I made. You can kind of tell, like, this one's more dainty, and I used the same pattern on both. I ran out of chain for the gold one, so the gold one is a little bit shorter, but it does work with different types of chains, as long as you're just making sure that you're being loose with your tension. That's really all that matters for crocheting with chain, and it'll make your life a lot easier when working with a medium that's so hard. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I will answer them below. Working with chain is really difficult, and it takes a lot of trial and error before you get into a nice rhythm of using it. And thank you.